You're in the water loop.
Welcome to Waterloop, the podcast helping water leaders to discover solutions and drive change. I'm the host, Travis Loop. This episode comes to you from the Reservoir Center for Water Solutions in Washington, D.C., where Waterloop is a media partner.
Many water utilities across the U.S. are grappling with aging infrastructure, underfunding, and staffing challenges, but solutions are within reach through smarter management and targeted technical assistance. From a conversation at the Reservoir Center, George Hawkins, CEO of Moonshot Missions, shares how his organization helps utilities of all sizes improve operations and adopt innovative technologies. George emphasizes the crucial role of environmental finance centers in delivering technical support to ensure underserved communities benefit from the historic influx of federal funding. With examples like Toledo's shift towards energy recovery, the discussion illustrates how utilities can enhance efficiency, reduce costs, and drive meaningful environmental progress.
Let's start with your 6 years since you've left running DC Water and done a lot of different things with Moonshot Missions and all the other hats you seem to wear with water. What are some of your observations now about the utility space now that you've been for 6 years?
What a great question, and how
Just get right into it.
Well, how delightful it is to be with you again.
Yeah,
it's been a while.
It has been.
But I just love what you're doing, and I'm glad to sit down and talk with an old friend.
Yeah.
About issues we know we both care about so much. What I've been struck, because in DC Water, I was so connected to a place and a utility. Did I talk with others? Yes, but you're so fixated on what you've done. And really, in the 6 years since, what I have touched are utilities of every size or shape all over the country, and actually all over the world, although mostly in North America. Yeah. And it's brought home messages, some of which are no surprise to me, but are just deepened. What I learned at DC Water, which I still miss, is I just love the people. And they were suspicious of me when I arrived. I was a lawyer coming from the outside that regulated them, had no experience in a utility, but once I showed curiosity and interest in what they were doing, opened up their arms, taught me a lot, and then together we were able to do a lot of cool things. And what I've learned is that is common to utility people everywhere I go. It's just amazing what a good group of human beings there are who've devoted their life to this work, which is often, as we know, unheralded. Most people don't know what the heck they do. Oh, you work at a sewer plant, all the things that we know. That's starting to change, but still that's not an unusual scenario.
Sure.
So that the people who are in that job so hard, often frequently, unlike DC Water, understaffed, underfunded, struggling to get things done, have a great inner fire. Why do we stay? Why do we keep doing this? I don't have enough staff, all these. I'm still there. It's because I'm so committed to the work. Because it means so much to me and all the people who are in my community, even if they don't know it.
Very mission driven.
Totally mission driven, and it's also such a human, there's a human component of it. And I've loved the people that I've met. That's on the very bright side. On the less bright side, and this isn't really about a people thing, but I've been struck by it. And actually I heard about this more after I left DC Water than when I was there. Moonshot's a small business, and we started from scratch, and we're trying to do good things. And we're often seeking to work with utilities, going through the processes it takes to engage with a public agency. And that's really hard and takes a really long time. I'm sort of stunned by that. I had no idea. And I've talked to some folks like, oh yeah, DC Water, you got better at it, but your procurement system was really tough. I'm like, you should have told me when I was there. Because now that I'm on the other side, there's all sorts of rules in place, for example, that utilities have, totally well-meaning to help small businesses. But the totality of the process that it takes to actually get a contract with a utility, even when they want to hire you and the dollars are there and the right steps have been taken, is incredibly difficult.
Is that a function of being a government entity?
It is. I think of the function in two ways. One is it's a government entity, and second, it's well-meaning people, again, people I love, who do specific things without seeing the whole. I'll give you an example that parallels what drove change at DC Water. I remember when we started to ask the question, what does it cost from when a meter turns to when $1 is in the register? That whole process, meter to cash. We asked other questions like that, system-wide questions. And what the first recognition was, no one had ever asked a question before. So we didn't know. If we get $1 in the register, for the process that it takes to get the dollar, how much did that cost? Was that 5 cents of the dollar? Was that 40 cents of the dollar? Because that's a huge question. And when we started looking into it, we found it was a very inefficient system led by people who didn't intend to be inefficient. There was someone who was doing this piece of it. They're actually quite good at that piece of it without recognition of how that piece connected with any other piece. Or that, as we found in, one was when a part breaks, how long does it take to get the new part in place? It was 178 days or something, if you use the system. And that was because there was all these pieces run by people doing good work, not thinking of the whole. And you'd often have, well, I do this part and then I print out and I give it to the next system and they re-enter it into the next system and print out, and it, because it's going through this, and then it goes to a work order, then it goes to finance, then it goes to the budget, then it comes back, and then it goes to all these things. And a level of efficiencies that are possible when you start looking at a system. And that has to be relentless, because there's a relentless push on the other side to create complexity. Almost always for good reason. Something happened, there was a problem with the procurement, we have to write some more rules. Looked in isolation, you know why you're doing it and it makes sense because something bad happened that you don't want to happen again. But you have that happen often and you end up with a really complicated system
Stacking
where,
up.
well, actually that rule is asking for something that rule already had, and you end up, and there needs to be, and this is one of the messages we try to deliver to utilities, looking at the system. What we found with meter to cash, we were able to drop that cost. In my recollection, it was 35 cents. It was a lot. But by doing things more efficiently, we were able to drop that at least by half, and my bet is today is less. That's an enormous rate increase with no rate increase. All that money is money you already have that's being spent on the things that, and it's not by purpose, it's just that thought. So
You're saying you're able to drop that when you were at DC Water?
Yes.
Okay.
And I think anybody can.
Yeah.
If they start looking at meter to cash, broken part to part being delivered, looking at systems as a whole and figuring out the pieces to it, because that's rarely done in, and this may be true for private organizations as well, although there's a drive there to reduce costs for the obvious profit motive. In the public sector, there's no particular great motive, except, what is every utility, the other lesson? No utility has enough money, and every utility has more work to do than they can do. So if there's a thing that we can do that gets us more money without making our service less affordable for the people we serve, that's like the sun coming up after a rainy, cold day.
You think this is something you've realized more in the past 6 years?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Because I did realize it at DC Water. I just didn't think of it as, it has risen on the list of key issues to talk about, which is one of the reasons we're talking about it now, even though it's boring. It's like, well, that's not sexy or fun. But when we dropped that 179 days, here's what happened in DC. Another example. Something breaks, you go through the whole step to get something new, and it's 179 days. What does that mean?
That's
Nobody
6
uses
months.
it. That's 6
6 months.
Nobody uses it because it's too long. So no one uses the system unless we know we need something in 6 months and it's not an emergency or something. And so every once in a while the system gets used. But there's two things that happen in that world which we discovered. One is Blue Plains, the treatment plant for DC Water, had a gigantic warehouse. Huge. Taking up a lot of space, which is the most valuable asset at Blue Plains. It's contained on all sides. You want to do something new, where are we going to put it? Huge. Why? Because when they did order something, they ordered 25 of them. So they never had to order them again for a long time. So if you have a really inefficient system, what's one solution? Buy a lot at once and then sit it in a room so you don't have to buy again. Or we had folks going out and buying it with the company credit card at the very highest retail cost. when we looked at the system, we hired a firm called Kona, which is actually now part of the Xylem conglomerate, to look at our systems as a whole, and they got it down to 2 to 3 days. We tore the old warehouse down, built a small one. It's so cool when you go in there. There's a whole part of it at DC Water where you need a part, and you put in the part that you need, and this electronic conveyor thing goes,
Pulls it off of
open it.
P22,
Yeah, and
boom,
then
boom, boom.
hands it. It's like,
Yeah.
and it's a smaller building, and the place where that huge building was is where DC Water is doing side stream demon, which is an innovative technique that saves electricity and chemicals, and that's being done because of this project that made us more efficient.
Yeah.
So those kinds of things rise up on my list because of what they enable, the revenue they generate in a cash-starved world, and the stories. Here's another sideline.
Yeah, you got a lot of them.
Well, the
In a
other
good
thing we
way.
discovered as we did this work is it started attracting different people to work at Moonshot. Not that there was anything wrong with the people we had. I just needed some more people who understood sys software and systems. And when they heard, oh, we're doing these integration things and we're doing cool things with computerized, they were like, I want to do that. And we started getting different kinds of applicants because they never thought of DC Water. Coming out of a school where you're learning that wouldn't have been an area you would have gone until we started talking about it a lot. They're like, wow, I can really change the water system with sensors and data and using this as oh my gosh. And we started getting folks who came in, and then it was a positive feedback cycle. You get the cool is the wrong word. You get folks who know that kind of thing, you can do more of it.
Yeah.
You get improvements, you tell your customers are like, I've got a water utility that's doing that.
Yeah.
They have a whole nother story
It's a
to tell.
positive cycle.
Positive cycle.
Yeah.
I'll give you this, shifting over to Moonshot. As you know, Moonshot was formed just about 5 years ago, so it was a year after I'd left DC Water.
And I'll say, that it's been amazing, staggering to watch how you've grown it. Especially, it seems like in the past year, 18 months, it's really taken off as far as the people that you have, the projects that you're onto. So, I mean, just kudos to the amazing growth and success. And I want to dig into some elements of that. But for people that don't know, what's the crux of what you're doing?
It was driven by, and it's the reason I stepped down at DC Water, because I would tell the DC Water story. I had assembled what I thought was the all-star team. I know there's great people out, but I had a just awesome team at DC Water. And we did all these really cool things. So I'd go out on the road and I'd tell the story. People would come up to me afterwards often and say, that's an entertaining story. You tell it well, and it bears no relationship to us. We do not have a $500 million operating budget. We do not have this, that. We're not a growing city, which at the time DC was. We're a small place. I'm understaffed. I'm underfunded. I don't have an engineering office that can figure out how to do thermal hydrolysis or whatever you described. What am I supposed to do? Because we want to do that. I just don't have, we're good people. We work hard, but we're sort of holding on. And I kept hearing that. I was like, that's a huge challenge that needs an answer. And that's what Moonshot is.
And I think about that too, right? You, like you said, you were at one of the most well-resourced utilities in the United States, but that's representative of a small sliver of the tens of thousands. I always lose track of how many we have, but right? Like you've got this crazy scale.
And so then I started diagnosing, why are most utilities not doing these innovations? And my friends in the water tech world would be, we've got this company, and they've got this great thing and that great thing, and every utility in the country should be doing these things. Why aren't they? I was like, well, and then I wasn't thinking DC Water. I was thinking most of the utilities which aren't in large urban, even a lot of the large urbans are challenged because they're Rust Belt. And they've lost, they're still big, but they've lost population, are very sizable, low income. So they still have
revenue
those
base is going down,
challenge, which is not enough money and too much work. And so I charted out, here's the terrible story of most utilities, unfortunately. This is the sad thing that I have seen all over the country. And it's not because of any of these wonderful people. They're holding on as best they can.
It's the model that they...
The model, any system that is built on assets that age, over time decreases in performance. So my house, I got windows to replace. It just happens to old infrastructure. So without investment of money, your performance of the asset declines with age, as we do as people. The cost of maintaining that system goes up because you have to maintain it more. You do all, and think of how hard a business, you're running a system where you're telling your ratepayers, I got to charge you more money for a system that works less well. Like, what business works on that?
Yeah.
And then you're taking that and what the tech firms say, which is often true, if you do our thing, you buy this gadget, your costs will go down and your performance will go up. We'll reverse that trend. And that question was, why doesn't everybody do that? And the answer is this, and I'm pretty confident in this answer, is that if you take a utility to get to that, what the tech firm is telling you what happens after the thing is adopted and being used. What they haven't described is all of the steps a utility has to take to get there. Well, in order to know what technologies we need to assess, where are we? Well, that takes time and effort to figure out our current conditions. Once we figure out our conditions, well, what are some of the things we should change? Who's going to help us figure out what those things are? So then we figure that out. So let's do an RFI or to see who's out there. Then an RFP, when we select it, well, do we have the money and engineering design, all of those things. And there, I charted out A through F. There was cost time and money in addition to your budget, which isn't grown. And time of people is often the biggest thing. Like,
Precious resource,
Who's going to do all that?
Yeah.
And as soon as I charted that out, this is when I was still at DC Water, actually in an essay titled Moonshot, which is where the whole name came from, was that essay. I was asked, what's the moonshot for this question? Is who can help an under-resourced utility overcome those bubbles that we know are there? I call them bubbles because if you have your cost line, which is going up because your system's getting older, these are additions to your cost line. Or if you do it within your cost line, you're cutting something in your threadbare budget. So wherever that bubble shows up of additional cost, it's bad because it's either more money or cutting from something else, which mainly means it doesn't happen. And that's why I said to the tech firms, it's not because at the end, they can't get there.
Right, sure.
The other element is, well, maybe there's two other elements. One is everyone, even if you are resourced in a utility, is aware that people are always selling you things. That's okay. That's how they make a living, makes the country go. But you're always a little suspicious. Are they overselling? Do I really need this? Well, so there's an automatic cautionary on top of everything else. And the third is the damn thing going to work at my facility? Yeah, because if it doesn't, I'm doomed.
You're sunk. Yeah.
So those were the things that I wrote. I added those to the Moonshot paper. And then there's these other things too, which is suspicion that someone's going to oversell, or even something you don't need, or I don't need it now. Like of the 10 things I could do, is that the one I really should invest in? And how would I know what to put them in order? So that's where Moonshot came from. Moonshot is a nonprofit 501c3. We're 25 of us with a cadre of volunteers, and they're all people with public sector utility experience. Not all, because we have some administrators, but the bulk of the team are public sector utility people who know how. I have class 4 drinking water operators, which is the highest level in most states, class 4 drinking water operators. I've got PEs, I've got PhD wastewater engineers, these people who know way a heck a lot more than I do, just like it was at DC Water. And they can come into a utility as a peer. We're not going to recommend anything we don't think you can do. We're not going to recommend anything that unless we think it's scaled to what's possible. And by the way, if you're worried about whether your operators will know how to do it, we'll come in and help train your operators. And we'll be at your shoulder helping you with those extra bubbles, which are mainly people problems, every step of the way. And we sell nothing.
What are a couple examples of how you're coming in and helping these utilities?
So we're doing work in the Great Lakes.
Okay.
Very happy. The Great Lakes Protection Fund has been a great friend of ours and funded us to do work. And the idea is we're going to do targeted work with a small number of utilities, develop models that are replicable and relevant to a much larger group of utilities, but with the case studies in place. So sort of in phases, do the right thing, show how it works, and then expand it to others. And in the Great Lakes. And our first group of utilities was Toledo, Akron, Lima, Gary, Indiana, a group of utilities in Michigan, and that was a group on a particular issue, a new phosphorus limit from a discharge. So I don't remember all their names. But let's talk Toledo. I grew up in Cleveland, just go up there to Cedar Point when I was a kid. And Toledo had a wastewater utility that was under public scrutiny because of the algal blooms on the western edge of the Lake Erie.
Yep.
As you have seen.
Yep. They've had to shut down their drinking water because of it.
Drinking water, and why is that? And are you doing the right thing? And whether it's the utility's fault or not, what I learned running a water utility, if it's a water issue, you're on the line.
Yeah.
And so we came in, and all the pieces worked. Andy Cricken, who's one of my colleagues, ran the Camden County Municipal Utility Authority, 36 years of experience. Actually now they're 42. So he's one of our veterans. He spent his whole life running wastewater plants. He's not almost nothing he hasn't seen.
Yeah.
We bring him in, the leadership of the new of us. So we were able to create a nice introduction to get to know. Then we sent our operators and engineers to the site, walk their sites, ask questions. We call it humble excellence. We know a lot, but we're humble. We know we'll learn from you, but we absolutely will learn all about your system because no one knows it better than you. And in that discovery, and by the way, we do a whole research project before we arrive. We have a protocol, so we know a lot about the utility. We show them respect. We know about you. We've done our homework. We admire what you've done. This is never about that you guys are wrong. It is about that there's a lot of other things you might consider on the way. And what we discovered, they finished a facilities plan. Looked at the facilities plan, next 20 years, no energy recovery, no waste recovery. It wasn't that there was anything in there that was wrong. This is the classic bubbles. It was
keep doing what you're doing.
Just do exactly what you've been doing. It could have been a facilities plan from 20 years before. And so we talked to them about it. They were interested enough and had trust. We're not selling, you might do some new things, but if you buy those new products that we might suggest, like I said, we get nothing from that, other than we think they are something you should consider. And we did a workshop. So Andy Cricken, who did the first net zero wastewater plant that I know of in the United States, we went up and toured it when I was at DC Water. He talked about what they did on this issue at a utility of a similar size. I brought in some of my ex-guys from DC Water who had done the energy recovery and waste recovery. The phrase from Kurspiat is there's no such thing as a waste, there's only a wasted asset. Assets. And when they heard that, they changed everything. They discarded the old facilities plan and they're writing a whole new one that is premised on energy recovery. That's the moonshot.
Yeah.
They're now going in a direction. They're being advised by a group that has only their interests in mind. They will be now hiring different folks to do the work. So someone will make money from this, but it won't be us. Our happiness is, and here's the wonder, it's still going. So we haven't gotten there yet, but this is all in operation. About a period of time later, the mayor of the town was so excited about this, and Congressman Kaptor from that part of Ohio, they had a press conference with the utility talking about this new direction.
Wow.
And think of that change from being a utility that was being the world of what all, to one that's being lauded for this new direction, carbon capture, energy recovery, waste, all these wonderful things.
And in that kind of Rust Belt, tougher area economically, and you know what, we're going to be so progressive.
Progressive, and this is what I love about it. It's what I loved about it. They're going to save money.
And then to your X and Y and all that, when you start to get those wins, right, then it just builds the momentum.
So we absolutely right.
Yeah.
You're absolutely right, because what happened now, one of our other ideas is you should adopt not just an asset management system, an environmental management system. So you know of all the things you could do at your water utility. There's a lot of lenses you should look through. One is this lens of fiscal. You can make your balance sheet stronger. You can generate more revenue, reduce costs, and achieve things if you think that way. That's part of the energy recovery question. The other end is, are you doing the most environmentally beneficial project? How do you know which order to do them in? So we are encouraging them, and they're putting in place an ISO-based, so an international standard environmental management system. That's another offshoot of this. So they're great, same people. This is not like they all of a sudden, no, it was the same group. They needed to have a little confidence that there was someone there who could help them out. They were they were smart, capable. They just needed that boost.
Yeah.
And that's the Moonshot story. And we're in over 110 communities in 38 states at the moment.
Fantastic.
And we're gaining stories like that, all at every size, by the way. We're helping very tiny, isolated, manufactured homes, as they say, mobile home parks on these broken down distributed systems. You can tell someone built that thing, sold these places and left.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, it's just corroded and rust. We're helping little communities like that. Several in California we're helping to connect to the regional wastewater authority. In order for them to be willing to take on this responsibility, again, who can help with the additional costs of doing a good deed?
Yeah.
We can.
Yeah.
All the way up to Miami-Dade, which is we're helping in Southern California, one of the biggest water utilities in the country, not just in Florida, and everywhere in between.
Sure.
Because the model of a trusted peer advisor, nonprofit, not gaining economic benefit from outcomes, knowing what it takes so we never oversell. We have to believe that your utility can do this. But by doing this, if that means you need support, we're here to deliver it. That works. And it's been really fun to see how it works. And our team, you should see, we have a staff call every week. Twice a month, someone on our staff call gets teary-eyed.
Yeah.
As do the rest of us on the lead the charge on that, because of a story that they tell of what is possible.
Well, thank you for the perfect segue to one of my two big questions I have for this conversation. We're here at the Reservoir Center for this event, Careers for Change, around the U.S. wash sector. I can't say it enough that there's 2.2 million people in the United States that lack safe water and or sanitation, right? You know this.
Yep.
It's insane to me. It makes me highly emotional to think about, right? And I've had the chance to kind of go to some of these places and see it a little bit. Tell me about that. You're here, you're going to talk at this event about what you're experiencing through Moonshot. Share some of that, please.
I'll say several things on it. And one is, I didn't know. And I sort of feel ashamed of myself. I personally found out about this, because it was before the report. It was 2.2 million, it was Dig Deep, and beautifully done. I love Dig Deep.
Yep.
But this was before Dig Deep has helped to elevate that issue in the national consciousness. But Dave St. Pierre, who ran the Chicago system, one of the biggest in the country, wonderful person, but a truly grizzled veteran. I think it was a church group that originally inspired, but he went out to a Navajo community called Bodaway Gap. And we didn't know he didn't know either what he was going to see. And he met this community. At the center of it was a woman named Grandma Sarah. She lived in a trailer, boarded up windows, no electricity, no water in the trailer. Small community, by the way, very dignified and positive people, despite things that the rest of us would say. How does anybody live that way?
Yeah.
And they would have to go either by foot or in a truck to fill up water pitchers, and no water at that location. And we found David found one of the places they typically went to water was an agricultural water source that had uranium and arsenic in it. And when he came back, he had tears. It was the first time, not the first time ever, but where Dave told the story of what he saw, and on our call, got emotional about it. And we all decided as a group, even though that wasn't, we were helping water utilities that have that, we have to lean in on that. So we've been working with that community. We actually have helped them design and in the process of building their first drinking water source in that community right now, Bodaway Gap, same place. And we're working with the San Carlos Apache, we're working with the Makah, we're working with the Samoba tribe in California. And what gets us, and again, like I said, I didn't know. By the way, we're also working in Alabama and there's not just a Native American, but another experience our team had. They went up checking out a community in the St. Carlos Apache that had.
Where's that?
This is in Arizona.
Arizona, okay.
I'm saying that with great confidence. I believe that's Arizona. It could be New Mexico. But they're classic broken and failing septic systems. We'd heard. So we went out. And what our team discovered, and this was our grizzled veteran double class 4 with our Navajo, wonderful woman engineer named Margot. She's fantastic. They went out together seeing these places. And in one of them, several of them, you could see the waste coming up out of the ground from a failed system. And you'd see bicycles and toys in that. And as they were looking at it, a little boy came up, and our double class 4, he's an ex-football player, big guy, warm, is Nathan Coe is his name, wonderful person, but came up and pulled on his pant leg, is like, "Are you coming back?" And when he told that story, it was another one of these teary-eyed moments, and we decided, yes, we're coming back. And we created a new program called Clean Backyards, kind of worked, and what Clean Backyards was, the next time Margot and Nathan went out, and Margot talks to the tribe. We have to be very respectful. Where do we go? What do we say? We've learned a lot about that. We went with a vac truck, by the way, run by a Native American business. And when we got there and we saw a problem, vac it on the spot. We're not going to leave this until and then we're going to help. What's the design? What's the problem? We're finding houses where they design septic systems up gradient.
Oh my God.
Which means that was a bad actor who built stuff, got paid for it, left.
Split.
Knowing that doesn't even take an engineering to know that if the boat to flow uphill.
Gravity, how the way water flows in gravity, that's
not gonna
elementary
work.
School.
So I would say I did not know the gravity of the situation, and I'm sort of ashamed of myself for that.
Well, because you've been in the water space for several decades, right?
Yeah, longer than I care to admit.
And you kind of, in the past few years, have had this realization of the reality that people are living with.
And our view is all of those situations need help. So yes, we're doing work on these tribal lands. In other places, that in Appalachia, there's a lot of straight piped waste is not an unusual thing, which still just boggles my mind. Septic systems that were designed poorly and are not working. People who don't even know how to clean it or what they should do with their septic system. They've never been, and that's something that someone doesn't know by instinct.
Yeah.
I've lived on well and septic, and I didn't know what to do.
Yeah.
So we're small communities that do have systems, but that are way past their useful life, all the way up to very large communities that have significant low-income neighborhoods. And my view is that the Moonshot approach, a peer trusted advisor with technologies that improve balance sheeted performance that we know work, that we will help you walk through getting to the point where they can perform. And by the way, this is the Environmental Finance Center part. We can help you get federal funding for it through the state programs, if that's relevant.
Yeah.
That's a beautiful thing.
Well, that's what I want to ask you about. Lastly, is this technical assistance piece, right? We've had this incredible federal funding come down. We've had an EPA that has set up these environmental finance centers, realized that the technical assistance is needed for all these communities that are under-resourced. Now, the tough challenge is getting those dollars where they belong, where they need to be. And I think that's very difficult. And I hear a lot of people talking about that challenge and kind of how do we do this? And there's almost a race against the clock and all this. What's your take on that situation, getting those dollars where they belong, delivering the technical assistance, helping the communities that need it, having this happen successfully at this historic opportunity we have?
The key word that I think you used is have it happen successfully. So the question is, how do we define what success is?
I realize I just gave you a lot of challenges in one question.
Well, no, I love the question because it is a huge question. I don't think not only because SRF funding has been around for a long time. So while there's a burst, this is a topic that is not going away, and what are we going to keep doing after this because it works? Yeah,
so you're right. This can't be just we get this money to these places this time. The system needs to change fundamentally for the future.
And I would say that it was a wonderful goal and effort, and B, we're doing pretty well given the circumstances, but there's at least two nested set of challenges. One is the SRF program. I used to run the SRF office for Washington, D.C. on the clean water side, is not a system designed for small systems. It's just like that procurement question.
Yeah.
You look at an SRF, it is not an easy thing to do.
Sure.
And there's a lot of steps that you've got to go through to get there. And one of your points that you just made is, would you have a system set up that's designed with this audience in mind? You'd streamline it if you were doing it from scratch, as opposed to DC Water's got engineers, this, that, and the other. We can do these plans. For a group that has 25 employees, and they ought to have 40. So they are holding on. Can they do all of those things, even with help? That's hard. So I think one of the questions that's on my mind is, that is a absolutely good, not even good, that's a wonderful objective. It is, I'm not a big political guy, but it's red state, blue state. This can help folks in every kind of state, and it's a uniting program, not a dividing program. If we can figure out how to help these with the systems we run, because it wasn't built with them in mind. The second point is, rarely, so DC, Moonshot is an environmental finance center designated to do that exact work. And the reality, and this is no surprise as soon as you say it or think about it, is we rarely get to a utility where the first issue on their mind is doing an SRF application. Because there's so many other things that are a problem that have nothing to do with the SRF.
They're trying to meet their permit.
Yeah, I got a
requirements,
permit,
right?
I'm out of compliance, and I got this problem. I've only got one water source, we've got harmful algal blooms, and that might eventually lead to a capital program. We don't even really know what our balance sheet looks like, because we haven't had really good book. Can you help us with that? Our governance structure, this isn't working. There's a lot of things that often need to be addressed that are absolutely important. So I would include that in what are the measures of success. Because without those things, the precursors to a utility that can apply for and administer a federal grant, that is no small task. Those are the precursors. And once the precursors, it's not just that they're better at grants, they're better at lots of things, because you've built the utility's operational infrastructure. And so I define success. If success is only how many SRF applications we get out, it's not a bad measure. It's a critical measure. But there's a broader measure of what we're helping these communities learn to do, which relates, by the way, to the conversation we just finished, which is, when a community tries one of these things and figures it out, they feel so good about themselves.
It builds their capacity.
It builds their capacity. It builds their enthusiasm. It builds their sense of self. All these small communities are trying to get people to come back.
And hopefully it builds their customers' confidence when they see these changes
Multiple
happening.
benefits to the health and welfare of a community are wonderful.
So would you say you're optimistic about the delivery of all this historic funding with the use of EFCs and TAs and all that?
I am guardedly optimistic.
Okay.
I think that what is absolutely will be true is that more money will go to lower income communities than has in the past. Because very little in most cases went. And that wasn't because there's anything wrong. Think you're a state agency person. I've got to get out a certain amount of money every year. That's my measure. And I could do 5 projects of 20 million each, or I could do 50 projects of 5 million each, or 2 million each. Whatever the math is.
You corrected it, you caught it.
I'm a lawyer. And I have the same number of people. By the way, the 50 projects of 2 million each, actually each one of them often takes longer because they have less staff. So you almost always say, well, I'll do the 5 projects for 20 million because that's what I can do. And that's not bad. Those are good projects. So this notion of how are we going to help lots of smaller communities is a real challenge at every level, not just the EFC side. But what we're seeing is a great desire to succeed. Because I think there's an understanding, again, red, blue, almost any, these are communities, not the exact same as the 2.2 million, but so similar, that have such glaring needs. And they deserve clean water just like every other person. And we can do this if we think about it and have a program. And I think we have one in place like we've never had before. And we're getting better at it. The other thing is that it's a learning thing. When we started this off, and when I say we, it's all of the groups that are doing, this was, Moonshot had been doing it for several years beforehand. There are organizations like RCAP and National Rural Water who are doing it for a particular category. But technical advice oriented towards technical solutions at a utility. That's the other thing that's unique. This is not a short term, we're going to go in, by the way, wonderful work. You have a problem, order a chemical, we can help you with that. No, this is, we're going to diagnose your plant we're going to think of some new ways you can handle your secondary that takes less chemicals and less energy and actually will reduce your pollutant load. That takes, I have to know your design. That's a longer, that is a deeper dive, taking a deeper level of expertise.
Yeah.
And that's really exciting because that hasn't existed before.
And I guess there is this high level of chatter all across the country among all these groups about this need to get the dollars to the places where it's needed. So
Right.
that hopefully will have the impact. George, we could go on and on, but
Absolutely.
I think we'll wrap it. Thank you for sharing such great perspective and info.
It's been a delight as always, and I can't wait for some years in the future to come back and see where we've gone.
Yeah.
But I got to say, you telling these stories is as important as the work itself, because if folks don't hear this, not just me, all of the stories you tell, then we can't amplify the message. And when you amplify the message, such a wonderful one, people come to us.
Yeah.
And that's on you, brother.
All right.
So thank you for that.
I appreciate that. Thanks, George.
You're in the water loop.
Water loop, water loop, water loop.